Derek said sorry before he even knew what he was apologizing for. Her phone had died, she'd missed her exit, she was 15 minutes late meeting her sister, and somehow, standing in his kitchen that night, Derek was the one saying, "I'm sorry, I should have reminded you to charge it." She hadn't asked him to. She hadn't even blamed him out loud. He just felt the tension walk into the room before she did, and did what he always did. He absorbed it, like he was built for it. He'd been doing this for 3 years, taking the blame for weather, traffic, her bad moods, her family, her exes, things that happened before he even knew her. And the strange part was, the more he apologized, the less she seemed to actually respect him. He couldn't figure out why being agreeable kept making things worse. Welcome back to The Unseen Mind. This channel exists for one reason: to hand men the psychological clarity nobody gave them before it cost them something. Tonight, we're breaking down the exact moment a man starts apologizing for things that were never his fault, why it feels so automatic, and why that one small habit is quietly dismantling attraction from the inside without either person noticing. The reflex that isn't politeness, it's appeasement. Here's what Derek didn't understand about himself. His sorry wasn't kindness. It was his nervous system doing damage control before his brain even caught up. Psychologists call this the fawn response, a survival pattern where a person learns, usually somewhere early in life, that conflict is dangerous and the fastest way to make it disappear is to absorb it personally, publicly, immediately. Somewhere along the way, Derek learned that a calm room mattered more than an honest one. He became the family thermostat, the guy who says sorry not because he did something wrong, but because someone else feels something uncomfortable, and he physically cannot sit inside that discomfort for longer than a few seconds. Here's what most men get wrong about this pattern. They think apologizing constantly makes them the mature one, the guy who doesn't let ego get in the way, the bigger man in the room. Wrong. Completely wrong. What it actually communicates every single time, without a word of explanation needed, is that you are the emotional shock absorber of the relationship, the guy whose comfort is always up for negotiation, and nobody, man or woman, stays attracted to furniture. The real, uncomfortable truth is this: apologizing for things you didn't do isn't humility. It's outsourcing your own peace of mind to someone else's mood in real time. And every time you do it, you teach the room silently and repeatedly that your version of events doesn't matter as much as hers. Derek wasn't keeping the peace like he thought. He was quietly disappearing, one unearned sorry at a time. Every sorry is a vote for who's in charge. Frame theory is one of the most misunderstood concepts in relationship psychology, and it explains precisely what happened to Derek's dynamic without either of them consciously choosing it. Your frame is your internal reality, your version of events, your sense of what's fair, your honest read on a situation as it's actually happening. When two people disagree, whoever's frame survives the conversation is, whether either of them says it out loud or not, the one actually running the relationship underneath the surface. When Derek apologized for a dead phone battery that had nothing to do with him, he wasn't just being nice or agreeable. He was surrendering his own frame, silently agreeing that her frustration was valid and his innocence in the matter was irrelevant to the outcome. Men mess this up constantly because they confuse frame strength with conflict, as if holding your ground automatically means an argument. You don't need to raise your voice, get defensive, or win anything to hold your frame intact. You just need to stop collapsing it the second someone else's emotions get loud or the room feels tense. The correct move isn't, "I'm sorry, that's on me." It's something closer to, "That's rough. Hope your sister wasn't too annoyed." Warm, supportive, present, but rooted firmly in the truth that her missed exit was never yours to own in the first place. Every unearned apology is a small, quiet vote cast against yourself in an election nobody told you was happening. Cast enough of them over months and years, and eventually, she stops seeing a partner standing across from her and starts seeing a mirror that only ever reflects her own moods back at her. The debt she never agreed to. Here's where it gets psychologically ugly, and this is the part men almost never see coming until it's already done damage. Every time Derek apologized for something that wasn't his, He wasn't just losing frame in that moment. He was quietly opening what psychologists call a covert contract. This is an unspoken agreement, invisible to both people involved, where Derek starts unconsciously expecting credit for all this grace. He keeps extending over and over. He never says it out loud, not even to himself, but somewhere underneath, a ledger is running. I keep absorbing the blame for things that aren't mine, so eventually she owes me patience, gratitude, maybe even less conflict going forward. The problem, the part that wrecks men who don't see it coming, is that she never signed that contract. She doesn't even know it exists. So when Derek's resentment starts leaking out months later, in passive-aggressive comments, in sudden coldness over something small, in blow-ups that seem wildly disproportionate to whatever triggered them, she has no real idea why. From her side of things, he was just being agreeable, easy to be around, low maintenance, and now he's apparently punishing her for something she never remotely agreed to owe him. This is exactly how good men quietly become bitter men without ever fully understanding the mechanism that got them there. You cannot bank apologies you never needed to give in the first place and expect a payout somewhere down the line. There is no later. There's just a man who slowly stopped liking the version of himself he'd become. She's not the villain. Your conditioning is. By month 2, something had shifted in Derek's relationship, and neither of them had consciously engineered it or even noticed it happening in real time. His girlfriend had learned, through pure repetition and nothing more sinister than that tension in the house got resolved faster if she let it simmer a little instead of naming it directly herself, because Derek would eventually crack under the silence and apologize first, every single time, like clockwork. This isn't manipulation on her part. This is operant conditioning, the exact same mechanism that trains a dog to sit for a treat without anyone sitting down to design the lesson. Behavior that gets rewarded, gets repeated. Derek's sorry was the treat. So her frustration, consciously or not, learned patiently to wait him out. This is the part men need to hear without immediately getting defensive about it. She's not the villain here, not even close. Ignorance of the pattern is the actual villain. Neither of them sat down and deliberately designed this dynamic. It built itself quietly, one unearned apology at a time, exactly the way conditioning always does, without permission and without malice. The fix isn't blaming her for learning exactly what you kept teaching her, session after session. The fix is breaking the reward cycle at the source. Stop apologizing for things that were never yours, and the behavior that depended entirely on that apology has nothing left in the room to feed on. Conditioning only survives for as long as you keep paying it out. The real cost was never the apology itself. By the time Derek finally noticed the pattern for what it was, he realized the apologies were never really about phone batteries or missed exits or any of the small stuff on the surface. They were about his own fear of conflict, a textbook case of loss aversion, where the discomfort of sitting inside 5 tense minutes felt so unbearable to his nervous system that his brain would trade almost anything to make it stop, including his own integrity in that moment. Saying sorry felt like a small, cheap price to pay for instant relief. It never registered to him as a real loss, because the damage doesn't show up immediately or dramatically. It shows up 18 months later, in a woman who slowly stopped asking his opinion because somewhere along the way she stopped believing he actually had one worth defending out loud. That's the real cost here. Not the apology itself, but the version of you that quietly goes missing every single time you hand one over that you never actually owed. The men who reverse this pattern don't do it through big, dramatic speeches or ultimatums. They do it through the discomfort of letting a tense moment sit unresolved for 30 extra seconds without rushing in to fix it with guilt. That's genuinely it. That 30 seconds of uncomfortable silence is exactly where your frame either survives intact or quietly dies for good. Derek's mistake was never loving too much, whatever that even means. It was never learning that love and self-erasure are not remotely the same skill, no matter how similar they can feel in the moment. Derek eventually caught himself mid-sentence one night. Her phone died again, same familiar tension creeping into the room. And instead of, "I'm sorry," he just said, "That sucks, we'll figure it out." Nothing exploded. Nothing collapsed the way his fear told him it would. If anything, she softened faster than she ever had after one of his apologies, because for the first time in a long time, she wasn't managing a man who needed rescuing from his own guilt. That's the version of transformation available to you too, starting tonight. Not some full personality overhaul, just the quiet refusal to keep paying for crimes you never actually committed in the first place. If you've caught yourself apologizing for someone else's bad day, her traffic, her family, her mood, drop it in the comments below, because you are nowhere near alone in this pattern. Subscribe if this hits something real, because next week we're breaking down a pattern almost every man misses completely until it's already cost him the relationship he thought was solid. You won't see it coming. The Unseen Mind. Stay sharp.